Good morning, everyone. We will start nice and prompt. 'Cause I'm very grateful to all of you who have already arrived, but we'll take care of some housekeeping because I can see there's still a few people coming through the virtual door. So welcome. My name's Lindsey MacDonald. For those of you I haven't had a chance to meet, I'm the Chief Executive of Magic Breakfast, and I'm so excited to welcome you to today's talk. I will tell you a little bit about what we're going to be hearing about, but first, as I say, the housekeeping. So the event, sorry, is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch it back, play through and listen back to your favorite bits, and also share it with colleagues, which we would encourage and welcome you to do. If you would like or require captions to follow along with what the speakers are saying, you can enable captions on your machine. Just at the bottom there, there's a show captions, which you can choose to enable. Hopefully it can pick up and understand my slightly Canadian British accent, and you don't have any issues with the text. The other thing just to mention is that we do have a variety of speakers, all bringing different perspectives, different insights to the topic that we're going to be discussing. And so I'm sure you will all have, I'm hoping, lots of really interesting questions. So if you look again at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A section there, and you'll be able to add in your questions either for all of the panel, or you might want to direct it to somebody in particular. But please feel free to add them throughout the Magic Morning session, and we'll come at the very end to answer some of those. And at the end, we'll also be asking you to give us your feedback, complete our survey. Those of you who know Magic Breakfast know that we are always looking to improve everything that we do. And so we'd love to hear what you liked about the Magic Morning and what you'd recommend or love to see us do in future. And in the spirit of always looking to improve, I think today's session is something that has been a long time in the making. We are going to be hearing more about the report that we've done in partnership with British Nutrition Foundation. I'm delighted to say we're going to be joined our first speaker, Ayela Spiro, who is a nutrition science manager from the British Nutrition Foundation. She's going to take us through some of the key findings. I would describe it as a taster, a nutritious taster, of course, of the report, and we'll be able to share with you after the event the session and the rest of the report. So you'll have a little bit of an insight to that. We're also joined by one of our wonderful funders, Charlie McEwen, who is the director and director of good causes at the WPA Benevolent Foundation, long-term supporters of Magic Breakfast, and has really seen and understood the value and the impact of ensuring that no child is too hungry to learn at the start of the school day. And so what better place to go than one of our partner schools, where we have actually had one of the panelists join literally directly from Breakfast Club this morning. So I'm delighted to say we're joined by our very own engagement partner, Linda Worthington, Shirley Green and Michelle Blanchard, who are two of the absolutely crucial staff from a partner school who make the magic of Magic Breakfast happen day in, day out. For those of you who have read our annual report, which was shared just a couple of weeks ago, we highlighted the fact that from September of this financial year, we launched what we're calling our Magic Menu. And the Magic Menu was about providing more choice and variety for children and young people. That came through our What's for Breakfast report, which some of you may have heard about in a previous Magic Morning. I think the quote that we go back to is that sometimes breakfast can be a bit samey. So we really wanted to provide more choice and variety, but it also gave us an opportunity to have a more sustainable, a more cost-effective, and important for today's conversation, a more nutritious breakfast at the start of the school day. So without any further ado, I am delighted to welcome Ayela to share some of the key findings from our report. Thanks, Ayela.
Thanks very much, Lindsay, and thank you for Magic Breakfast for inviting the Nutrition Foundation to this morning's session. It's a really important area for us. One of the things that we do at the Foundation is really to try and provide evidence-based information and education and expertise to try and empower people to adopt healthier and more sustainable diets. And when we do this, we try and work very much in partnership with other people because the impact is so much stronger when we do that. So we were really delighted to be able to work with Magic Breakfast to really start looking at the evidence around breakfast and nutrition. Next slide, please. So I want to start with the recent publication that Lindsey mentioned, which is the publication of our scientific review on the importance of breakfast in school-age children, which was published at the end of last year. It was supported by Magic Breakfast and they were supported through Arla, Heinz and Quaker. But the findings, when we write science, is always about what we find in the science, and so is independent. So why did we do this? Why are we interested in breakfast as a nutrition charity? Well, we became increasingly concerned with the reporting that students were coming to school hungry. And we understood that if you have frequent breakfast skipping, this might contribute to children not getting the nutrients that they need, and this might increase the risk of both short and longer term health concerns. And as you know, of course, we're concerned about childhood obesity as a public health concern. Next slide, please. Why is that? Well, I'm sure you're aware that there's really an unacceptable high prevalence of obesity in the UK and actually globally, with around 1 in 5 children leaving primary school living with obesity. And what's really stark is this disparity in obesity rates by socioeconomic group. And this graph clearly shows that children living in the most deprived area are more than twice as likely to live with obesity than those living in the least deprived areas. And why is this important? Because living with obesity has a real significant impact on children's physical, but importantly also their mental health and well-being in short and longer term. And this, as you can see on the right-hand side, includes outcomes like depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, children being sort of more absent from school, from illness and for psychological reasons, requiring more medical care, and having some sort of things that we typically associate with adults, like high cholesterol, high blood pressure, joint problems, breathing difficulties. And what we also are really interested in is the fact that obesity tracks. So an obese child is more likely to become an obese adult. Next slide, please. And when we look at dietary quality and what children are eating, we can see here in the UK, we have some dietary recommendations. And if we look on the right-hand side, we can see what children are actually having. And on average, they're consuming too much saturated fat, too much free sugars, too much salt, and not enough of the real sort of nutrient-dense healthy things like fibre, fruit and vegetables, and oily fish. Bringing this back to breakfast, we can see that sweetened breakfast cereals, sugars, sweet spreads, morning goods like pastries are all contributors to children and young people's free sugars intake. And actually, we did some work a few years ago now with PHE and now OHID, the government, where we analysed primary school breakfasts that parents were sending in the pictures of, and found that many of them had high levels of free sugars and low amounts of fibre. And so it really, when we talk about breakfast, we really need to consider the type of breakfast that children access is important, as well as just breakfast per se. Next slide, please. And as well as the sort of fruit and veg and sugar and fat, we also were really concerned with micronutrient intake, that's your vitamins and minerals, because we know that these support really important functions for our health, like immunity, our cognitive health, and normal growth and development in children. And actually these micronutrients can be derived from a healthy, balanced and varied diet. But as we can see from this table, there's evidence that in several of these micronutrients, on average, children are having intakes below the inadequate levels, and that's what LRNI is. It's just a marker that we use in research to look at inadequate levels. And this has become particularly of concern in our adolescent population. Their needs are higher and their diets are typically poorer. And so we get this inadequate intake of some of these micronutrients. And we know, for example, highlighted here is iron, and that's a particular concern in adolescent girls, making them at higher risk of iron deficiency anemia. The thing that I really want to stress is that low micronutrient intake can be seen both in healthy weight children, but also in overweight and obese children. And it's just typically caused by unhealthy dietary patterns. So energy-dense diets with high intakes of foods that are high in saturated fats and sugars and salt really aren't the same as nutrient-dense diets, which have diets of a higher nutrient quality. Next slide, please. And again, going back to the stark inequalities that we see in our society, not only do we see that in obesity, but we also see it in sort of healthy diet consumption. So for example, here we can see that as household income increases, children have increased intakes in those households of fruit and veg and oily fish and some micronutrients, such as vitamin A and zinc. Next slide, please. And I came into this by saying that one of the reasons that we were looking at this area was our concern around children's hunger. So what about children's hunger? We mustn't ever forget about this, and it's particularly relevant with the ongoing cost of living crisis. And here we can see the results from a survey by the Sutton Trust done in 2022 that found that 38% of teachers in English state schools reported an increase in the number of children coming to school hungry. And these, again, marked differences between the most deprived compared to the most affluent schools, and increasing numbers being seen asking for referral to food banks. And one of the things that we were interested in was to really look at this association between hunger and learning. And this nice diagram in the right-hand side sort of shows the impact of the lack of food energy in short-term memory. And if this persists, we can get longer issues in memory and learning. And so perhaps it's no surprise that the teachers that report children coming to school hungry report that they're less attentive, more disruptive, and less likely to understand and remember the day's lessons. Next slide, please. So I've given you a really brief background context into the sort of the state of our children's diets in the UK. So let's now turn to how breakfast fits into this picture and looking at some of the research we used in our review. I don't know if you're aware of this, but breakfast is used as an indicator for positive, healthy behaviour. And this is seen in this World Health Organization survey that they do of school children globally. So they look at things like eating fruit and veg as positive, eating sweets and sugar-sweet soft drinks as negative, and breakfast is seen as a positive health behaviour for children. And here we can see that in all of the devolved nations of the UK, we can see a pattern that boys typically will eat breakfast more regularly, and there is more regular breakfast intake in younger adolescents. So as adolescents get older, their intake decreases. Next slide, please. And this is also reflected quite starkly in our nutrition and data survey that we have in the UK. And again, what's notable that breakfast skippers are more likely to be female, more likely to be older adolescents. But I wanted to highlight here that they're also likely to be living in areas of greater deprivation. So we can see in this graph on the right that the percentage of children in secondary schools in areas in higher deprivation is considerably higher than reported in schools in areas of lower deprivation. Next slide, please. And coming to something that I'm really fascinated by, this idea of does actually breakfast skipping matter? Why should it be an issue? So one of the ways that we look at this in the research is by exploring the nutritional intakes of breakfast consumers versus breakfast skippers. And looking at some of the research that we covered in our review, we looked at some systematic reviews in children across a number of countries, including the US, Canada, UK, and Europe. And these really suggested that regularly consuming breakfast was associated with better dietary patterns. This included higher intake of fruit and veg, fibre and protein. And breakfast consumers were also really interestingly lower consumers of fast foods, and perhaps really underlying this understanding that breakfast consumption can be a marker for healthier dietary behaviours. The author of these reviews also highlights some higher micronutrient intakes in breakfast consumers, some of the B vitamins, calcium and vitamin D, for example. And this could partly be attributed to the fortification of certain breakfast foods, such as breakfast cereals. And of course, breakfast cereal consumption can facilitate dairy consumption, as breakfast cereals are normally eaten with milk, or in some countries with yogurt, and will typically contribute then to calcium intake. And in the US and Canada, for example, milk is fortified with vitamin D, and it contributes to vitamin D intake. But again, highlighting that not all types of cereals share the same nutritional qualities. Some can be high in free sugars, although reformulation has been lowering that figure. But we also need to think about what cereals we're giving to our children. And when we look at the research looking at breakfast, we need to be aware that there are different types of breakfasts, and we need to be aware of how they contribute differently to children's quality. Next slide, please. Research suggests that breakfast is a really good opportunity to get children to increase their nutrient intakes. And we can see on the right-hand side here that actually some breakfast foods really are great providers of the essential nutrients that we need in our diet. As we said from the start, we know that children having breakfast, it can alleviate hunger when children are in schools, and support better nutrient intake. And that includes the nutrients of concern that we saw in the sort of the context slides, where we saw this sort of high level of inadequacy in some of our adolescent population. These nutrients of concern can be provided by breakfast, like iron and fibre, and also can make an influence on children's food choices, for example, help increasing fruit and veg intake. Something that's not often talked about, but is also sort of something that concerns the foundation, is hydration. And breakfast can also be an opportunity to encourage hydration. We know being dehydrated can cause tiredness and a lack of concentration, and breakfast becomes a good opportunity just to include some fluid in the diet. Next slide, please. So I just want to summarise some findings. As Lindsey said, the report is big. It's, well, I would say this probably as one of the authors. It's absolutely fascinating, but I can only summarise a really brief amount of our data here today in the time slot that I've been allocated. But we would say that the review shows that children and young people who regularly eat breakfast are more likely to have better nutrient intakes, have better dietary patterns, and have dietary quality. Looking at some of the health outcomes that we looked at that I haven't discussed so much in this talk, but we saw that compared to breakfast skipping, breakfast consumption is associated with better weight status, something that perhaps our teenage girls aren't so sort of aware about and often miss breakfast for reasons of weight loss. Actually, the science more suggests that breakfast skippers are more likely to be heavier. And also starting to look at the importance of breakfast in some school-related outcomes like short-term learning. We know that eating nutrient-dense breakfast foods, such as lower sugar whole grain cereals, whole wheat bread, nut butters, milk, lower sugar dairy foods like low-fat yogurts, eggs and beans, these are all foods that are providers of good essential nutrients. And children who skip breakfast continuously may find it difficult to get enough of these key nutrients that are going to help their growth and development, as well as their cognitive and mental health functions. Breakfast can alleviate hunger, and that can help children to process information in the school day. The evidence suggests that breakfast can contribute to short-term learning capabilities. But I suppose to end it by saying that more research is needed to investigate longer-term learning, educational attainment, and health outcomes. You can imagine that the relationship between breakfast and educational attainment is so confounded by deprivation, by educational background for families, and for many various reasons. But it would also be really useful to know about the impact of different types of breakfasts in relation to other foods consumed throughout the day. Next slide, please. So I'd just like to end by saying, please read more. We have a great website that you can find the review on. We also are doing a bit more work on this. We had a really great roundtable last year that Lindsey was part of, that really started to get people together to think, what is it that we can tell from the research and what is it that we want to get out there in the public domain from a science perspective. I think raising awareness of the importance of breakfast for young people, increasing recognition that every meal matters, so it's not just the lunch that's important, it's also breakfast. Promoting the inclusivity of breakfast provision, because we know, as we've seen from the data, the stark differences of inequality and deprivation, and also to implement evaluation properly so we can really get some really good evidence and more evidence to behind this. So I'd like to end there and say thank you very much for listening. Really happy to answer any of your questions, and look forward to the rest of the morning.
Thank you so much. I'm sure I speak on behalf of many of us on the call from Magic Breakfast perspective. It's so helpful and interesting to hear the science behind what we see and hear about in the classroom each and every day. And also, I think, positive and reassuring to think about the greater opportunity for breakfast to have a real impact on children's learning on a day-to-day basis, but that long-term development as well. So thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Charlie McEwen, who, as I mentioned at the beginning, is from the WPA Foundation and a wonderful and much appreciated supporter of Magic Breakfast, to bring a slightly different insight and perspective on our work and the findings.
Thanks, Lindsay, and thank you, Ayela. I want those slides. Brilliant. I think, and also I'd quite like to read a bit more on it. 80–90% of the applications that we receive refer to the impact of the pandemic on school children, whether it be that they're more overweight, less fit, less sociable, and so nutrition is so important. You're definitely talking to the converted, and it never ceases to amaze me, and it's why we're supporting Magic Breakfast. The importance of food, good food, and good nutrition. But I digress. My brief was to outline why we're supporting Magic Breakfast, and if I may begin with the conclusion. If you hear nothing else, Magic Breakfast is an amazing charity, and please spread the word. Support them, talk about them, and get them the attention that they deserve, because no child should go to school hungry, but they do, and the compound effects corrode opportunities to learn. As for me, I'm the product of an agricultural, slightly free-range and probably feral childhood, followed by a first career in the military. I put so much of where I am today down to a love of life and luck, and lots of it for a number of stupid things that I've done on the journey. But on leaving the army and having children, I'd like to think that my two are kind, whilst aware of making the most of every opportunity that befalls them. As adults, our aim has to be the next generation, helping the next generation reach their potential, whoever they are, whatever their beliefs, and wherever they are from. And as a parent involved in the foundation, I've been given an opportunity to do my bit. As well as too many home interests, I've got two jobs. Firstly, as a corporate communications director of WPA, doing media and awareness. And secondly, as a director of good causes for the WPA Foundation. The reason I'm here today. The foundation is the social responsibility arm of WPA, a not-for-profit health insurer with two objectives. Helping customers fund their healthcare, the insurance business today, and promoting good health, the work of the foundation. Our roots go back 120 years to a time before the welfare state, before the NHS, yet our objects remain the same today as they were then. The foundation promotes healthy activity. Locally, we have a charity that supports less well-off West Country parents with profoundly ill children with travel and accommodation costs. And not a week goes by where I'm reminded of how lucky so many of us are. The collateral damage of an ill child is extensive, and it affects everyone. The second element of the WPA Foundation has sought national and local remits. Offensively, my brief a decade ago was to get fat children off the sofa, off gaming, off crisps, off junk food, and make them active, aware of opportunities that appear before them, and grab them enthusiastically before anyone else does. My fear was that we would receive so many applications that I'd run out of money within months. So I tightened the promoting good health objective to healthy activity amongst the young in the West Country. And I got no applications, but the experience made me get under our DNA, learn our objectives and focus our purpose and refine what we do. I wrote to head teachers and 30% responded, which underlined how busy they are, but how much of their focus is on the classroom. Turning the tables with the audience in mind, it was probably read as an offer that was too good to be true and filed in the dustbin. Cutting a long story short, we now support schools across the UK to purchase healthy physical activity equipment. Not necessarily the work of Magic Breakfast, but I'll explain more in a minute. Healthy physical activity equipment includes the usual bats, balls, lines in playgrounds, table tennis tables, goals, outdoor gyms, musical instruments, to name a few. But I never cease to be amazed by the imagination of schools. For instance, edible playgrounds is something I've signed off a number of. Those are vegetable patches for the uninitiated. If you have children at school and are connected to a school, which I know some of you are, and there is a project we can support, do get in touch. Our support is unconditional, averages £2,000 to £2,500, but there are a couple of niceties. A photo of the new equipment in use and a thank you, and you'd be amazed how many don't. That said, we're based in the West Country, and I'm keen that we have a number of larger projects in our backyard. And these currently include Unlocking Potential Somerset, an amazing one-year programme for 14 and 15-year-old school children to help them with the decisions that they're about to make, whether it's T or A levels or work. There's Channel Adventure, an adventure training centre in Taunton, giving free opportunities to children on pupil premium during the holidays. There's the Somerset Cricket Foundation, taking cricket to village schools in Somerset. And then there's Magic Breakfast, and arguably the project that, if I'm allowed to have a favourite child, I am most excited about. The WPA supports the foundation because of our not-for-profit DNA. Investing in the communities in which we thrive is the right thing to do. More and more customers are interested in the values of their partners, and dare I say it, if the price is right, the work of the foundation is a differentiator. Employees today are more discerning, and we have a focus on having an inclusive team. They join us because there's more to work than money. They stay with us because our values get under their skin. I can't prove it, but intuitively, I think we're more productive as a result. Why Magic Breakfast? Well, having not heard of them 3 years ago, they are, forgive me, Lindsay, they're like an onion. Every layer revealed something even better than I had understood before. The eureka moment was when I went and saw them in action, and a really inspiring head teacher introduced a broken community where he was creating a safe haven for his pupils. He talked of a murder, a stabbing, and one of his pupils being set alight by an older child on the estate, all within the previous 3 months of my visit. The result is that, as well as our continued support of Magic Breakfast, we created another project at that school to expand the Magic Breakfast activity, but purchase some healthy physical activity equipment. Better still, the WPA team was so affected by a toned-down version of this story that they fundraised for the school before Christmas. If I may conclude with a congratulations, a shameless plug, and a plea. Congratulations to Magic Breakfast for all that you do. Every single member of the team that I've interacted with are amazing. Thank you. The plug is to ask that if you know of schools fundraising towards healthy physical activity equipment, then get in touch. The process starts with a telephone call. And then the plea really is to talk about Magic Breakfast more. If you are on social media, like, love, and repost. If you work, understand what your company's social responsibilities are and make a bid for your company to support Magic Breakfast. I've gone on too long, but many thanks, and I look forward to questions in a minute. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlie. And I do promise he's not on payroll. We are now going to head north to Liverpool, where, as I mentioned, we're going to be joining a couple of our wonderful partner school supporters who have just come from a breakfast club themselves. They are based in Liverpool, and hopefully Shirley Green and Michelle Blanchard can come onto screen. They're joined by Linda Worthington, one of our brilliant engagement partners, and they will be telling us a little bit about what it's really like in a school, in a breakfast club, and the impact of nutritious and variety of food choices in a breakfast provision.
Hello, everybody. My name is Linda Worthington. I'm an engagement partner for the Northwest, and I have the pleasure of visiting St Gregory's Primary School in Liverpool every year. I'd like to introduce you to Shirley and to Michelle. They are going to introduce themselves and tell them what a wonderful job they do here at St Gregory's. Over to you, ladies.
Thanks, Linda. I'm Shirley.
And I'm Michelle Blanchard.
And we are learning mentors here at St Gregory's. Our role at school includes breakfast club and after school club for children from 3 to 10, 11 years old. During the school day, we provide targeted support to children who are experiencing difficulties in learning or who need additional help to reach their full potential. We spend our day working with individuals or with small groups to identify their needs and their barriers to their learning. We build positive relationships with children and with their parents. Unfortunately, for some of our children, one of the things that prevents them from learning is hunger. When they come to school with rumblings in their tummy or this feeling of being empty, then it is difficult for them to settle in the classroom and focus on learning.
Okay, so if you would like to take us through a typical breakfast morning at St Gregory's, that would be wonderful.
We set up the start in the morning. It starts the night before.
Yeah. Me and Shirley have got a passion about breakfast club. We've been doing it now for many years. We set up the night before. You put cut the bagels like full, put the cling film and everything on them, bills, set some games up. 2 members of staff come in the next morning at 7:30, and one of them, and then another 2 come in at 7:45. We set the games up and that because it's always the night before, and then we put a little bit of music on, don't we, Shirley?
The radio is normally on. Children are greeted at the door by school staff. They come in, take their coats off, go straight to their cloakroom, and then they come into what we call our mod pod for breakfast. Our head teacher comes in most mornings to say good morning to the children and to have conversation. Our nursery teacher, Mr. Beals, comes in every day. He helps to settle our youngest children if they're a bit upset or a bit reluctant to leave mum in the morning. Most of our staff will call into breakfast club. And then we begin serve. And there is a huge variety of cereal, and they can have cereal with milk, cereal without milk,
warm milk,
cold milk.
You name it, we try to do it.
Toast with butter, toast without butter, bagels with butter, bagels without butter, light toast, dark toast, beans on, beans in a separate bowl. You name it, and we provide the breakfast that they will eat. After they've eaten, children, and I think Charlie will be impressed after listening to what Charlie's just said. After breakfast, children join in their physical activity for the day. It could be dodgeball, dance, football, hula hoops is a big thing. Yeah,
colouring.
Sometimes there's iPads, building blocks. They like to build big things with big blocks.
The animals.
Yeah. And that's it until 8:35. Our doors open at 7:45 for the children, and by 8:35, most mornings they're all fed and have joined in an activity, and it's time to tidy up and get ready for class. and children go into class here at 9:15.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Is there anything that you do around breakfast that is unique or special to your school to encourage children to eat?
We used to invite parents in, didn't we?
Yeah.
And they used to come in to see what their children would do during breakfast club. And we used to get like a lot of parents, didn't we? And then we'd invite the parents to go outside to do like an activity, whether it's basketball, and those parents were, it was really something, yeah, to say the least.
We don't do that as much now, and that's really down to space. But I think that the thing about our breakfast club is there's no stigma attached to children being hungry or to anybody who hasn't had breakfast. We offer a free breakfast club in school. And even the children who don't come to breakfast club, as children that are arriving to class, we've always made extra bagels and extra toast. And anybody who's arriving at school who's hungry or has maybe had breakfast, 6:30, 7:45, and is a bit hungry again now, there's always something available for them too. And it doesn't, children are not, it's just part of our culture here. If you're hungry, you get something to eat. There's no holding back. I can't let anybody know I'm hungry, or I can't let anybody know that there's no cereal this morning.
We can be walking down the corridor, can't we, Sian?
Yeah.
And some children will go, Missy, I haven't had any breakfast today. And there'll be no questions asked. It'll be, come on.
Yeah, and we just take them. Our school days are planned so that at least one of us can be around to make breakfast for the children who are late, or for the children who are unsettled a little bit.
Because the parents do say to them,
Yeah.
sometimes it's a challenge of the morning.
Yeah. But parents know that, if the milk's off at home or there's no bread for toast, parents know that we will provide breakfast for their children before they go into class. And sometimes that's just a bit of a breakfast, that kind of thing.
Or a little text we've got, work mobiles.
Yeah. You'll get a text in school, but no breakfast. And I think that's the unique thing about ours. Breakfast club is not 7:45 till 8:30. It's for as long as children need it to.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. As you just heard, children who have consistent access to adequate nutritional food are healthier and learn better. Have you seen that in school?
Oh, yes. Concentration. Yeah. Children going into the classroom from breakfast club, they settle quicker, and they're ready to learn, from the minute the day starts. Our Year 5 teacher is a huge thing. Always says you can tell the children that go to breakfast club without even asking, and they are just, by the time they've been to breakfast club and they've eaten, they've played some games, and they're ready then to go into the classroom and to settle. Teachers have mentioned before that they can see the concentration lasting a bit longer from children who've had, come to breakfast club. Their focus doesn't wane sort of mid-morning.
And it's one share on the friendships as well.
Yeah.
Like some children could be struggling with their friendships, and you can see them making new friends in different year groups, and it's really nice to see.
Children who go into class with full tummies and they played some of their games before school starts, they're happy, and it makes a big difference to how they settle to learn. Some of our children eat better, and we've got Magic Breakfast providers with such a good range of breakfast cereal, and the amount of parents that say, "We would eat that at home." Can't believe they've had to a little bit. So brown flakes, you touch them around.
That one was the next year.
Yeah.
And they're sitting around the table and they're socialising.
Yeah.
And watching other children, how they use the spoon. Because some children come to us and they don't know how to lift the spoon up, or the nursery children, Year 1 children, and they're watching the other children.
We have noticed over the years an improvement in attendance, and not just with one child, with families of children. who maybe historically have been poor attenders, and we've got them in this regular habit of coming to breakfast club, and they want to be here, so they want to be in school. And sometimes I don't know whether it's about coming to eat the breakfast or it's about the one-to-one time that they get from school staff, and not just Michelle and I, but there are 3 other members of our breakfast club team. We can give children time to go into the central room for 15 or 20 minutes before the day starts. Or the games that Mr. Gaskell organises for them. So I think it's a mixture of all of those things.
The activities, there's something for everyone.
And children enjoy coming to breakfast club. If one of us is called away from something, one of our own children very often will say, "Oh, miss, can I dry those dishes for you? Take the tea towel and things." The wide range of cereal and things has really helped, hasn't it?
Yeah. The children have got their own names for them.
Yeah.
It's like, can I have some pillows this morning?
Their own names. But I would say that cereal is one of the things that parents talk about as well, and the price of cereal. The price of everything has gone up. But we've all noticed how much cereal has gone up in the shops. And parents will naturally go for the less expensive cereals. Unfortunately, they're not always the most healthy. And so we are grateful to Magic Breakfast for the range of cereal that we can offer to our children and the amount of food.
But we do parent voice, we do children's voice, and we've had feedback, haven't we, from the parents. Like some parents said they couldn't go to work without us, they can't believe it's free. They thanked us, they thanked Magic Breakfast Club. They're just very grateful, aren't they? And the children love coming to Breakfast Club.
When you talk about parent voice and what other ways do school children get involved with breakfast, you talked to me about school council or something.
Yeah. I think the children who come to Breakfast Club, they invest more in school life, don't they? Generally, the children who are here each day for Breakfast Club, they're the children who you'll see doing other things round about school, like they want to be on school council, they want to be a playground buddy, they want to be involved in peer friendship groups and things. They want to be involved in movies and all of those kinds of things. And that, I think that starts in Breakfast Club.
It's building a relationship.
Yeah, it is about relationships. First thing in the morning, we get the children straight from home when they're upset or they haven't slept very well. Somebody's calling, and we have those conversations with them, don't we? And
sometimes we don't know what's going on in it. And it's just to say, I've a good night last night. Something's gone on, and we know we've got good relationships with our family. Share that with people.
I think Breakfast Club is helping to create this just a culture of wanting to do more and investing more in school as a whole.
And do you have a specific case study that will highlight how good Breakfast Club has helped children?
When we returned after COVID, we did see quite an increase in what's now being described as school anxiety. I think we'd say that some of that was around children anxious to come back to school. But I think some of it was also about children really reluctant to leave the safety of their parents. And there was one child in particular who had never had a problem coming to school, never had a problem coming to Breakfast Club. And she, her anxiety was such that she would be clinging onto the door frame, but she didn't want to leave mum. She would be trying to run after mum on the playground. She was just so upset. Every day, it was very difficult time for her, for us, and for her, for her mum. But encouraging them to bring it early to Breakfast Club gave us longer to spend with her before the start. Be able to get it in through the door and maybe go to the central room and then get us something to eat. And it took a long, long time. Now she's the child in Breakfast Club who when other children are upset, she's the one that will go over and say, come on, let's go and let her baby, come on, let's go to the police officer. Just the one upset the other day. I just looked and she was like, I don't know, this little one, and I was like, yeah, she's just, it's just, it has really, it's helped her to resettle, and to get back on some kind of things.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for talking us through Breakfast Club and what it means to St Gregory's. I'd like to pass back to Lindsey now. Thank you.
Before you do, Lindsey, I'm sorry, Lindsey. We can't get across, how grateful school are to all of the support that we get from Magic Breakfast and from Linda, who's always on the end of the phone if I need her or if I've got questions and things. But we are in an area of deprivation, a very high number of free school meals, and I really don't know what we do without Magic Breakfast. So thank you.
As you can see, they're very passionate. Thank you very much. Back to you, Lindsey.
Thank you so much. Not just, as I was saying before we kind of joined the main webinar, not just for joining us this morning, but also for everything you do every single day, because Magic Breakfast would be absolutely nowhere without people like you in the partner schools each and every morning, very, very early in the morning. And we're just very grateful to you as well. So we're now going to welcome back all of our speakers to the screen. And I'm very grateful as well to all of you who have been submitting questions in the Q&A. We do have quite a few, but we've also got a little bit of time. So that is wonderful. And I'm going to start by coming to you, Ayela, if that's all right. One of the first questions we've had is with breakfast, and I maybe describe this as, are all breakfasts created equal? Is some breakfast, even when it has poor nutritional content, better than no breakfast, or is it more complicated than that?
You'll find in nutrition science, everything is more complicated than it seems. Can I first start off by just saying thank you to my fellow speakers? I feel sort of like truly inspired. We sit in our work doing our sort of research, and it's just incredible to see what's going on in the community. And I just, I'm really grateful for the time that you've spent explaining things to us. It brings our research to life. So thank you very much. Going back to the subject of, is any breakfast better than none? It depends what we're looking at. So if we're just looking at very short-term cognitive ability, that's really based on glucose. So as we know, our brain kind of uses glucose as a main fuel. So if you have something that fuels you, it's going to fuel some of your brain. And there are some sort of tests that have shown that short-term learning with anything is better because you've got something that's going to produce some glucose. But if we think much wider about what breakfast really means, so it sets patterns. I think your speakers, Shelley and Michelle, were talking about sort of the types of food that the children are getting used to eating that they might not have at home, the way that they get to sort of, learn about your cereal, breakfast, fruit together, that kind of thing, and developing patterns. That's really important. And in terms of sort of setting nutrient intakes and dietary patterns, sort of for going forward, then a nutrient thing is important. And the other thing to say is that we're looking at not just the very short term, but a sort of longer term, and we're really looking at those nutrients that are going to provide the micronutrients for what we were talking about, the immunity and the development. And the idea that if somebody buys a bag of crisps on the way to school, and one of the things in our research was like looking at that kind of behavior about people not having breakfast at home but not having breakfast at school, but actually going to buy something in the shop in between. Those are sort of not really providing the nutrients that we need for longer term health. So in the very sort of, in brief, very short, very sort of quick cognitive ability, yes, but in a much wider pattern, that the quality is really important.
Brilliant, thank you. I can imagine a few of us are thinking back to what did I have for breakfast this morning, and was that a good decision that Ayela would approve of? So I won't share. My next question that I want to bring is actually a couple. It's for Shirley and Michelle. And as we touched on, Ayela, you brought it to life at the very beginning. The cost of living crisis. We've all heard very much how much impact that's having, and certainly at Magic Breakfast, we have very much felt it almost from both sides. One is rising costs we've experienced, and then also the rising need in schools and in local communities. So Shirley and Michelle, how many children, I suppose, on a daily basis are attending, the percentage of children, and how many do you think aren't being reached at the moment? And then layering that cost of living question on, how has that maybe changed over the last 2 years or so? And have you felt or seen a difference in your local community? We read about the cost of living crisis in the media, but what does that look like in your school community?
At the moment in Breakfast Club, there's 60 children each day. We've got 197 children on row, and we've got 60 children each day come to Breakfast Club. So just about a third. But bagels and toast are offered to all children as they come into school. School do quite a lot of other things as well because of the cost of living crisis that we are in at the moment. And we've got initiatives like school uniform sort of recycling. So lots of our parents send in used uniform, and then we have a swap shop for school uniform. So we are doing other things. We're looking at growing our own foods as well. So we're starting a gardening project. We've got holly stalls, and we're working with other community groups. Not just about growing food here, but teaching families to grow their own food, in their gardens at home and things. The children that come to Breakfast Club now, it's 60 each day, and we sort of had to cap the numbers of that because of staffing, and because we offer the Breakfast Club free, school pay the school staff and all of the extra things that go on top of it. And because of our numbers, our younger age children, the staff ratio is different. So at the moment, there are 4 of us every day. And 2 days we try to make that 5. And if there's needs, then Michelle or I, if it's not our day, we'll jump on as well.
We've always pop in.
And there are always other staff around. But we do have a waiting list too. So generally what we say, that if children aren't using the place for, a successive number of days, then we'll take them off and we'll put somebody else in. We find that we very rarely have anybody come off. And that's really how much parents really understand the value to them and to their family of Breakfast Club.
We have just had a child not so long ago come off the register, and the circumstances changed due to work. Mum has came back in, and she's had a conversation about who's coming again. His routine, he's very upset and distressed in the morning because she's not come to Breakfast Club. So we'll try and meet his needs, won't we? Yeah.
Well, I have you on screen, if it's all right, and I promise I will go to other speakers as well, but there's lots of questions that, unsurprisingly, people would like to ask you both. And one is a very timely question, and I think a really helpful one for us at Magic Breakfast, because if the question is, if there was one food item that Magic Breakfast could introduce, what would it be? If you could wave a magic wand, the famous Magic Breakfast magic wand, what would that food item be?
These are eggs went down the trees. The eggs went down the trees.
We trialled eggs for a while. Yeah. And scrambled eggs and boiled eggs were really popular.
Any type of eggs. Try out
eggs. Yes. Yeah. Probably eggs.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, well, I can reassure you that we are working very hard, or our innovation and operations team are working very hard with the supply chain and delivery logistics for chilled food like eggs. So fingers crossed for that to be back soon. Because as you say, we did the food trial last year, and the response was really I think we were taken aback by how positive the response was from schools in relation to eggs in particular. So wonderful.
We are
Thank you.
excited about the prospect of the small pots of beans as well. We've looked at the beans flask to be able to offer our children beans, you know, as they're coming in as an alternative to a bagel or a piece of toast. Yeah. So we're quite excited about, you know, if that comes up.
When we were given the eggs last morning, the scrambled eggs, surprising how many children tried the scrambled eggs.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's a nice moment just to thank and acknowledge. I mean, Magic Breakfast couldn't do what we do without our partners, and we've got some brilliant suppliers and corporate partners who help us think about how can we innovate, how can we, I guess, address some of the challenges that you encounter or that maybe we see in terms of barriers to pupil uptake. And that takes me nicely to a question that's been asked about the first presentation. Ayela's talking about older adolescents being less likely to eat breakfast than younger ones. How can projects reach out to children of this age who are perhaps less enthusiastic than young children? So Ayela, I'll maybe just come back to you if there was anything, I suppose, in the research that you identified that might give us some tips and pointers.
I mean, I think that because breakfast clubs have been running for such a long time in the States, they've really been looking at how to get older children who are not, as we can see from the data, are less likely to be involved in breakfast clubs and be breakfast consumers. And so there are different methods, but I was thinking about something that Shirley and Michelle said about this ability of just when somebody's coming into the school, so they don't have to sort of come in and sit down, and because there are lots of so there are two things. There's one, how do you make it easier, and really thinking about what are the barriers that secondary school children are having, particularly the girls, and in higher deprivation groups. What is the barrier, and can we address any of those barriers, because that's really important. Then the other thing is to make it very easy and quick, because as teenagers, they don't like getting up earlier to give the time for sort of having breakfast. And the third thing is innovation, and what you were saying, Lindsey, was interesting about working with corporate partners, and so thinking, what is it? Are there some foods perhaps that would be really more exciting for older, like a grab and go kind of thing? But just to bear in mind that there are also unintended consequences. So we do have to look at the fact that if you're offering things that are in a classroom, it's taking away from your teaching time. It's being more disruptive in the classroom. It requires different levels of staffing and relationships with catering. So I think it's a really, really interesting area, and something that we would love to do some more research on how can we actually get this, because it's prevalent all over the world that teenagers, particularly teenage girls, are poorer breakfast consumers.
And just as a follow-on to that, actually, another question was asking if you have plans to disaggregate the data to either regional differences, cultural differences. I suppose those, as you've talked about age, but are there other disaggregations that you're thinking about exploring, or that we might want to explore together?
Yeah, so absolutely. So one of the things that we're looking at this year is diversity around Eat Well guides. So that's not, when I talk about diversity, I don't just mean sort of cultural diversities. It's also about regions. It's also about rural and urban. It's kind of like really looking at how relatable are the foods that we're sort of talking about here in relation to children that live in different parts of the country or from different cultures. So we work quite closely with a group called the Diverse Nutrition Association, and we're really hoping to really start to look at this area in a bit more detail, because it's not something that has been looked at in the research. And it's, as we kind of become more of a diverse society, neurodiversity, cultural diversity, ethnicity, all of those things are really important for us to start to understand, because as Shirley and Michelle was saying, that there's you see the difference that, whether it's social integration, food, being with adults that are showing them about good relationships, all of these things in breakfast are really important, but we need to make sure that it's relatable and relevant to everybody in the country, not just certain groups. So we'd love to do more research. As we always know, funding is a massive issue, but anybody on the call that wants to sort of fund us, please do.
Thank you so much. I'm conscious of time. We haven't, unfortunately, managed to answer all of the questions. I think this might be our highest number of questions in a Magic Morning, which doesn't surprise me given the absolutely brilliant speakers that we've had. So I will just say a very big thank you again to Ayela, to Charlie, to Shirley, Michelle, and Linda. Also a shout out to the Magic Breakfast team behind the scenes who make all of this run and operate so seamlessly. A very big thank you to you. So to remind everyone who is here, we will be sharing a survey. Please do fill it out. I've shared in the answers, the Q&A, a link to the report, but I'm sure that will also be included in the thank you and feedback email that you get from us. And that will also give you a link to our YouTube channel where the recording from today's Magic Morning has been included. And we will most likely, and I'm sure throughout all of those emails, direct you and welcome you to visit our new website, which we're all very excited about at Magic Breakfast. But we would also really appreciate your feedback as, friends, either new or old of Magic Breakfast. You can help us make sure that our shop window is the very best it possibly can be. So thank you all for starting your day with Magic Breakfast. Hopefully tomorrow, if you didn't today, you will all be thinking extra cautiously about what you have for that breakfast. Not all breakfasts are created equal, as we've learned, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much. Take care.